had a dreams that you could do so you could.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Spicy Pecan Podcast. Thank you for checking in again, guys. I appreciate the love. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. I actually got a bunch of people to hit me up about that, so I know that you enjoyed it, and I appreciate the feedback. My portion this week is going to be a little short because I really want to get to the interview. Real powerful interview. I interviewed Heather Jones. She is a science teacher in the Newark School District here in New Jersey. And she has a really unique perspective. I wanted to have a conversation about how we are approaching going back to school and how we're going to be having some really hard conversations now that we're going back to school, especially depending on, different age ranges. So anything that interests me or I think, would interest you, obviously I'm going to deliver that, but she just has a really unique perspective, very powerful voice, the way that she explains things. She can take a very complex issue and make it pretty simple. Obviously she's a school teacher, so I really hope you guys enjoyed that. But I did want to touch on a couple of, one thing in particular in the current events this week. Jada, why? Whew. Hard week for the Smith family. Actually, you know what? That interview went really well, I felt like. Like I've said, actually after I saw it, a lot of people are in therapy to get to exactly where these two people are. The way that they were able to have this conversation in public. I don't care how much practicing you did. It's still different when the cameras are on and that is going to be submitted over the internet and you can't take it back. So they didn't have to do it, but the fact that they did, and they did it with a lot of poise. Marriage is supposed to be about forever. So I think that they're an example of what forever looks like, regardless of the road that it takes you to get there. And just my honest opinion, you could call me whatever you want. People do. But I thought that was pretty petty of that young man. I understand people got to eat, people got to make money. Music business is hard. You're dropping an album. It's been some years. People probably not checking for you like that. But I thought that was pretty shady. And to release a whole docuseries behind it, explaining, getting rid of a secret and things like that. I get that. But I didn't get any part of his story saying that he was victimized and that a part of his healing had to be publicly, getting rid of that secret. So I just thought it was in bad taste. That's just my opinion. He could have kept that to himself, dropped his album, and I felt like, life would have just gone on. But every marriage is tested, right? Good luck to them. If they love it, if they're doing good, I'm happy for them. More importantly, Breonna Taylor's murderers are still out there, not arrested. In a recent protest, Portia Williams, Tamika Mallory, a couple of rappers, there was a lawyer that got arrested while they were peacefully protesting just a couple of days ago, and they're actually being charged with felonies. So the theory is, because this happened in a suburb, the theory behind that is the government is trying to criminalize taking protests to the suburbs, because that's really where, people start to get afraid and things like that. But this was a peaceful protest. So neither here nor there. I did, though, on my Instagram page, I did post the phone number if you want to call the district that a bunch of people were arrested in. I called this morning a whole bunch of times. Basically what they were hoping was, you flood the phone lines, ask why these people have been arrested, why they've been charged with a felony. All of us kind of got to do our little part here and there where we can. So anytime I have an opportunity to call a number, do a letter, do a petition, give a little money, explain something, whatever. We all got to get in where we fit in. So if you want to help out in that regard, you could check out my Instagram page. So I did want to mention one last thing though, before we hop into the interview. Very cool. Even though we don't always get it right in this country, other countries do get it right. In London, a statue of a UK slave trader was taken down and replaced with a statue of a Black Lives Matter protester. The Black Lives Matter protester's name is Jen Reed, and the slave trader's name was Edward Colston. So good old Eddie out, and Jen is in. So, and it's the cutest statue ever. I love it. She has this little jean jacket on. It's just, this is progress. That is moving forward. That is changing the pace. Instead, we're still fighting to keep hatred, in the shape of 10 statues. But let's pray for all of our people. Listen, every week, I'm still going to be doing my commercials in terms of the different businesses that I'm associated with. But I think it's important to highlight minority-owned businesses, especially at this time, building community. I did want to highlight one business that I saw online and just thought was really, really cool. Homemade jewelry. It's called April's Jewels. So if you text Jewels, JEWELS, to 910-461-1554, you'll get more information about custom handmade jewelry, all minority-owned business, and they have some really, really cool stuff. So check that out, guys. Make sure we're supporting, and make sure you're letting me know about different businesses in your area so I can highlight them. It's an honor for me, definitely. So listen, we know that we're going back to school. We know that funding is threatening to be cut if we do not. So, what is this actually going to look like? I want to hop right into the interview because I think that it's going to shed a light on, for all of us, even, for people who have children, but specifically for everyone, even people who do not have children. We touch on the importance of community around schools. And I think that, it's really important for everyone just to catch the vibe that we're trying to throw out. So, I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Heather, thank you so much for joining us this week. I'm so appreciative of your time. Let the audience know, can you give us a little bit about your background?
I'm Heather Jones. I'm 40 years old. Born and raised in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. And Brick City. I'm married. I have one 5-year-old son. I've been teaching middle school science since 2008. I've always taught in a urban school district. Mm-hmm. My mother is a urban school district middle school science teacher.
Yeah.
She's taught various things throughout my life. But this is my mother. My mother's going into her 43rd year of teaching.
Wow.
So education been a part of my life my whole life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even my older brother is an engineer, but he's also a college professor. So we've always just had education,
Yeah.
important to us.
Let me ask you a question, just piggybacking off of that. Your mom worked in urban districts. Why did you decide to follow in her footsteps and not go in a different direction?
It's actually an interesting story because I grew up never wanting to be a teacher.
Okay.
I grew up seeing the stress of my mom and how frustrated she would get with the fact that she wanted to do so much for her kids and like her hands were tied a lot. Right. And so my mom had a lot of stress growing up. She had a great schedule. Wasn't necessarily good for us because she was always home when we were home. But I did not want to grow up and feel, underappreciated like I felt like my mom was and all this kind of stuff. And I actually went to school. When I went to college for physical therapy. So I did work in that field. I was a biology and a psychology major. So I worked in a couple of different not related fields at all. I did physical therapy. I worked for the prosecutor's office at Essex County that dealt with domestic violence cases. So that was using like my psychology background. I worked for a pharmaceutical company that made cancer drugs. And then I just kept saying, I'm not happy, I'm not happy. And then my husband, I got married in 2007. And at the end of 2007, he was like, when you just going to become a teacher, like you love kids. And even though you love science, like you can have so much of a better impact if you just suck it up.
Right.
And so Newark Public Schools actually had a career fair in December of 2007. And I went, and I had taken like my praxis before that just to have something. My mom was always saying, well, take the praxis exam, which is a teacher's licensing exam. Take it just to have it under your belt.
Right.
Just take it. I was tutoring and substitute teaching when I could. Like I was always doing something like teaching, but I never wanted to fully jump in. And my mom was like, well, just do that just to have it under your belt. It's always good just to have. And I went to that career fair, and I was offered 3 jobs that night.
Wow, that's a big.
And I called my husband and I said, I have these 3 offers. And he was like, you need to just sign.
Yeah.
And January 2nd, 2008, I started teaching in Newark.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to even breeze over that because that's a huge decision, considering the fact that you could have made a whole lot more money somewhere else, and then even deciding to teach, to go to the communities that need it the most, and really keeping it all the way real are just not the easiest situations to jump into.
That's true.
So that is extremely commendable, and thank you, hubby, for pushing you.
He's like, I know you don't want to grow up and be your mother, but you might as well just go ahead and do it. Because I was always doing tutoring, mostly for free. You know, I was always mentoring kids at the church and things like I was always doing like education-like things.
Yeah.
And he was saying, I know you don't want to do this, but I think this is who you are. This is part of who you are. And I jumped right in, and I knew that it would be, it's not a lucrative field in regards to pay. But I read this one quote, and I'm not trying to sound cheesy, but I read this one quote, and I actually have it on my wall in my classroom, that it says, real teachers don't do it for the income, they do it for the outcome. And when I saw that quote, I was like, you know what? Most teachers I know have a second job. That's just what it is. But no amount of money can give me the type of fulfillment that I get when my students' light bulb goes off, or when I finally see them cross over into a level of maturity or things like that. So it's just something that I had to suck it up and be like, you know what? Who cares if you're going to grow up and be your mother? She's a bomb mom.
Yeah, she's a bomb. Just throw it up,
And then my mom was like, oh my God, you're becoming me. Even for 4 years in Newark, the last 4 years I was in Newark, I actually taught at the same school as my mom. Wow. So I was the 6th grade science teacher, and she was the 8th grade science teacher. So when kids got to her, she would be like, she would be like, I know you learned this in 6th grade. Like, I know. You can't act like you don't know this. I know what you know. Like, so,
that's right.
I mean, that was interesting.
So jumping right in, because we're fastly approaching the school year now. What are your opinions in terms of how prepared we are to actually go back and combat this virus?
As a whole, I don't think
just
we're
your
prepared.
opinion. Yeah, just your personal opinion. How do you think we're going to do it? I mean, this is a huge challenge ahead of you. I know teachers have pretty much gotten every, flu and every cold and all that. So your immune systems are rock hard, but, still, what's your opinion about going back? Are you nervous or?
I'm nervous because I don't feel like, how can I say this nicely? I don't feel like urban areas are anywhere near as prepared as we need to be.
Okay.
Suburban areas, and I can't speak to rural because I don't have any experience with rural, but suburban areas tend to have smaller classes. They tend to have more technology and more just supplies. They tend to have more staff per student. And these things are advantages in regards to keeping a building clean, sanitized, safe. Um, in my school, we're understaffed. We have a lot of students, so social distancing,
Right.
I don't really see that. I do think that we can successfully transition, because I don't think there's a problem when it comes to like remote learning. I think that the way that we went about it was too rushed.
Okay.
So that if we had already established how to use the equipment, the means of communication between parents, teachers, and students, if we had gone over all of that, I think it would have been much more successful than it was. But obviously that's nobody's fault. We were just all of a sudden told, like, you got to shut schools down.
Right.
So everybody was left scrambling. And thankfully, my district already had, like, every student in my school already had a laptop from the school. So it was a smoother transition. And then there are other districts where they all of a sudden had to buy hundreds of laptops, if not thousands of laptops, and try to make sure everybody had internet access. And, there was that whole scramble. I mean, even in my district, we had to develop a relationship with, I think, Spectrum, so that everybody would automatically have a hotspot put on their laptop. We already had students who did not have internet access at home. So, okay, how are they going to get to work? How are they going to, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that it can be a successful transition if we take the time to lay all the groundwork first. And I honestly feel like if we can't do that by September, then we need to start school in October, because we can't be so worried about a date that everything else falls by the wayside. That would be ineffective anyway. I do think it's possible, though, but
I mean, so I guess it's just totally impossible for us to completely do remote learning.
In certain grades. High school, I think that's totally doable. Even to a certain extent, middle school, I think that's totally doable. But when you have kindergarten, first graders who are not computer literate,
right?
My school district has a large immigrant population, so a lot of those students, they need ESL services, they need bilingual education. You have students who are special needs, they have IEP, individual education plans. They can't do that by themselves at home.
Very true. Very true. I didn't even think of that.
It's unfair for us to expect a student who's only been in this country for 6 months, who no one at home speaks English, to be able to sit in front of a screen, understand and learn and respond in English. That's just not fair. And it's not something that's unfair. That's the child's fault. Like, their parents moved here. They didn't have any control. And so in an ideal situation, when you have a school that all the kids are fluent in English, and all the kids are computer literate enough, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can see it totally being fine. I mean, colleges do that. You can get full degrees online.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think part of it is the maturity based on the age of the child. They have to be responsible to get their work done on time, and even responsible enough to ask questions if they don't understand something. And then you've got that other part where language comes in, where learning styles come in, where the kids who need extra help don't have access to it, or if you're a first grader, you need an adult home with you, and that can cause a bunch of problems if mom and dad have to work, or whoever you live with, grandma, has to work. Then when are you gonna have somebody sitting there with you to make sure that you're learning?
Right. What physical changes have they said they've made to the building to make things safe? Or do they have like 6-foot tapes like you find in Wawa and things like that? Like, what are they?
I went to my school building last week. They're starting to do the things on the floor in the hallway. They're actually, I think it's a better idea. I think it's a really good idea they do it by the locker. So lockers aren't going anywhere. Kids could pull up tape on the floor. So if they paint one locker, a certain color different from the others that's better.
Oh, got you.
And they've taken they've taken furniture out. So the classrooms that have desks and chairs, right now, those desks and chairs in the classrooms are 6 feet apart, and the ones that don't fit are going, I guess, to storage. They're in the hallway right now because the building's not finished. I personally don't have desks and chairs. I have lab tables.
Lucky.
So, well, you know. I also have a sink in my room and ventilation hoods and stuff. It's just the perks of being a science teacher. But
and you could actually get away with wearing the full bubble suit because it's science.
Yeah.
So,
listen, I don't know what's going to jump off, but I know it won't be jumping on me.
Exactly.
But I mean, so it's easier to socially distance in my classroom because I could just have people sit on the edge, but they would have to make my classes smaller, which I was saying, like urban classes. I mean, I've been in Newark and Elizabeth, and you know, at one point I had 36 students in one class with just me.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
And remarkably, that class was an ESL class and a special ed class at the same time. And I had no help. It was me, 36 kids.
And you still got hair left? Good Lord. God bless you. You still smiling and everything.
Well,
wow,
like,
that sounds like a huge challenge. Huge challenge.
Yeah, so when it comes to if you're already crowded in your classrooms and now people have to be 6 feet apart, and that's not just, a lot of people think it means 6 feet to the left or the right. That also means in front and behind.
Yep.
Which people somehow don't understand. Yeah. You can't have two lines when people are right behind each other, but they're 6 feet to the left. Like it means 6 feet all the way around. So
it makes absolutely
a class
no
that
sense.
used to fit 36 can now fit what, maybe 6 people if we do it that way?
Wow. So definitely a lot of challenges, obviously.
Definitely.
And I would love to check with you in about a month just to see where you guys are. Because I'm sure whatever the initial setup is going to be, as we kind of get into the environment and figure out what works and what doesn't, it would be really interesting to know how the schools are tackling this. But I want to jump in just because on this show, I talk about the importance of community involvement. And obviously, when we're talking about something in terms of education, especially in the districts that you're familiar with, the ones that you worked in, how important does community play in the success of schools, specifically in Black and Brown districts?
I think the community is extremely important. And I think that a lot of times in Black and Brown districts, members of the community underestimate their importance. A lot of times you get people who feel like, well, I don't have a kid that goes to school there, so I don't have any vested interest in the success, failure, events at that school, and I totally think that that's false. The more people who are, especially in Black and Brown communities, I think, let me rephrase that. White communities already have community involvement in their schools. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because they realize that it's important. So it doesn't need to be addressed because they're already doing that. And when it comes to our communities, you know, Black and Brown communities, you get, on the one hand, you get people who say, I don't have a member of my family in that school, so I don't really care what goes on there.
Right.
Then you have the people that they have a lot to say, but it's always bad. Oh, those kids, they come to school late, or they're too loud, or their playground is messy, or they walk on my grass, or whatever it is.
Right.
And then you've got the people, then on the other side, you have people that are involved and they feel like, I'm trying to be involved and it's not making a difference.
Okay.
And I think that there are several facets to community involvement with the school. I think that a lot of misinformation and just lack of information is among neighbors of schools and people in the community. Number one, there are a lot of, not all probably, but there are a lot of PTAs where you can be on the PTA in a school and you don't have to have a student in that school.
I love that.
A lot of
I
people
love that.
think that because it's called parent teacher association or whatever, that you have to be a parent or a teacher, and that's just not true in some districts. I
Right.
can't speak to all, but I do know that there are some districts you don't have to be the parent of a student there or the guardian of a student there, and you don't have to work there to be part of it. You can just want to be involved. And I
Yeah.
think that that's very important. Another thing that I think is important is for people, even whether you have a child there or not, you can be involved by getting your job to sponsor something. You can get your job to donate things. We've had, for example, when I was in Newark, the last school I was in Newark was in the Ironbound section. So it's like a highly Portuguese, Spanish speaking population. We had, restaurants donate food for certain functions. We had, you know, um, local bands, when we had like field day and stuff like that,
Right.
to
Right.
donate their time to, and it might seem like it's something small, but it's really not. Or even, we've had computers donated from people who, worked in nearby colleges like Seton Hall when they revamped their computer
Labs.
labs. Yeah, they normally, most universities, which a lot of people don't know, most universities usually just throw out their old computers.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing wrong with those
Right.
computers. They're just a little outdated. But for a school that has no computers, I'll take the 5-year-old
Absolutely.
computer because I don't have any, right? So, and especially considering in Newark, particularly how many colleges and universities there are, right? So
Right.
you've got Essex County, you've got NJIT, you've got Rutgers North, you've got, you know what I'm saying? Just in the area, you've got Seton Hall, you've got Montclair State, you've got all these places who are going to upgrade. But all it really takes is somebody in the community saying, let me reach out to somebody and see if they have anything or are willing, right?
Yeah.
Or you can have something, people sponsor, you know, rec league teams and things like that, right? So it doesn't always require a whole lot of time. It doesn't require a whole lot of money a lot of times. As a member of the community, you can just sit out in your front porch when the school bus drops kids off and just say good morning.
Yep.
You can just
Absolutely.
say, rather than coming out and saying get off my grass, you can get out and say it's good to see you at school today. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
I'm proud of you for being on time, or anything.
Yeah, I think
It
you
doesn't
hit.
require
I
time
think
or money.
you hit on a huge point. I mean, one of the things that we had talked about when we first started talking about, interviewing you, is you're either, when you're part of the community, we can get it right in education, or we'll have to deal with it later in other ways. So does, like we were saying, like, does that mean that, I'm at a stop sign and there's a kid that we could have helped through education, but instead he's holding me up? Because we know that the predecessor of crime is poverty and lack of education. So it's almost imperative that we do it. And I would even call on people who have moved out of the hood, who have moved out of urban areas into suburbs. That's still where you're from. You were able to make it out, but it's important that you lend that hand behind you. And one of the easiest ways to do it is interacting with the schools. Like you were saying, your job, if you're a computer scientist, would you tutor someone and teach them how to code? Would you, even if you didn't want to go to the school, would you sit in front of your computer, film a class, and give that class out for free to people? Anything that you can do to push it ahead, push it forward.
And even in addition to that, sometimes students don't aspire to a whole lot because they don't know what the options are to aspire to. Right? So if the only form of success they see is the person who didn't do anything with their education and is, hustling on the corner or whatever, that's what they're going to aspire to.
Right.
So, like, I know it was really important. Like I mentioned, my mom, it's always been important. No matter what school my mom has ever taught at, she's always said, we need to have a career day here. And if that means I have to do it by myself, then I'm going to do it by myself. And it was very interesting when I was working at the same school in Newark as my mom. My mom headed up the career day, and she was just drilling on my brother, who obviously is Black.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to come speak to these kids. Now, my brother is a biomedical engineer, and he teaches biomedical engineering at Rutgers. You know, he runs the lab. The lab is named after him.
Oh,
But he's
wow.
a he's a 6'5", 6'6" Black guy
Mm-hmm.
with an afro coming to a school in Newark wearing, a Iron Man t-shirt and some jeans.
Yep. I love it.
And the kids were looking at me like, that's really your brother? Yeah. And he starts explaining what he does. Like, even if you're thinking of a scientist, it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Right.
You can look like me. You can listen to the same type of, I come from where you live.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not given that choice, you don't know what's out there if nobody presents it to you, And
Absolutely.
my students were just over the moon. Oh my God, you first of all, I got the same t-shirt he got. That. Like I was just like, don't wear the pick in your hair and all that. Like,
Yeah.
we work here. So, and even after that point, every year I teach a unit on like properties of matter. So they deal with solid, liquid, gas, whatever. Every year that I've taught that, my brother has come into my class and spent the day doing college level labs with my kids. So they get
Wow.
a hands-on experience. Okay, we started with this, and now we're making these hydrogels. They don't know what a hydrogel is, but they're just
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. And then you get kids that say, oh, I thought this is what engineers do. But if you get a person that looks like you that says, no, all an engineer does is solve problems. That's it.
Yeah.
Then it gets their
And
mind to say, oh, I could do that.
yeah, and also people don't realize the math and sciences they're very liberating fields. I mean, you don't have to be the schmo with the suit on. A lot of places, like if you go on the West Coast, people coming in with skates and skateboards.
Yeah.
It's a very freeing industry. So that, because a lot of people, I think they get lost in the mix of having to conform.
Yeah, that white lab coat.
Right.
Sterile shoes. You know what I mean? My brother's like, first of all, it's my lab. So if I
Yeah,
don't feel like
exactly.
going, if I don't feel like going because it's Monday, I ain't going. That's
Exactly.
number one. Number two is, it's not about me showing up 9 to 5 every day. It's about the results. So if I get an idea, my brother has the liberty. If I get an idea at 12 midnight, I'm just go in my lab and work it out.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So those options have to be presented. Even options like an illustrator coming in and saying, I always like to draw, and now half the books that are on here, those are my pictures.
Yeah.
Kids, they see their talents and they don't see how that's going to make them money.
Right.
So they see the person who has the money, and they're maybe not living, the most law-abiding life, and they say, but they got money though. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Absolutely. It's still a vision of success, regardless of what you think about it or what it's a vision of success that I can actually touch and feel. I see these guys every day,
Yeah.
But your brother coming in. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, but if a member of the community can show them any other option.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. You like singing. You don't have to be, Beyonce. You could find there's somebody who, guess what? Somebody on the TV singing ba da ba ba ba.
Somebody got to write the words, and somebody got to make up the beat, and somebody got to set the engineer board when they're ready to record, and somebody's got to, So there's ways to make money in everything. Even if you don't make it in the NFL, there are ways to work for the NFL, work for college teams, and so it doesn't always have to be that. But I love that story about your brother. That's exactly what we need to get into, but we need to do it in a way where we're being proactive. I'm from this community and I care. Where can I fit in? This is what I do for a living. This is where I live. This is where whatever. What can I do? Where can I fit in the process? Oh, you're having a career fair in 6 months. Sign me up. I'm there. And I'm going to bring two people that I know from this neighborhood who have done X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean?
But it's also important even after that. Like, I mean, like I said, this is just what my family has done my whole life. So it's a little easier because it's like, look, you're my brother, and this is what you're gonna do. I'm gonna babysit for you. I'm gonna watch your kids this weekend, and you will do this lab with my students. But even in addition to that, you know, my brother has always said, like, okay, well, anybody who even if you don't really know what you want to do, you know, in the summer, you know, I'll take 15 people from whether it's Newark, Elizabeth, Camden, Trent, urban places, and just spend a month, a couple hours every day on a weekday in the summer watching what my graduate students do in my lab. You know what I mean? And it might spark an interest. And if you're not interested, fine. But then I have this other friend that does this, you know, he makes video games. My brother has a friend who codes for video games.
Yeah.
So if people in the community even just volunteer to let somebody shadow them.
Yes.
I know you like playing video games, but you don't know what goes into it. You know what I'm saying? You might like engineering, but you might not really be good in math. But there are other things.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things, even emerging markets like these headsets, these VR headsets. If there was that's an emerging market. So there's millionaires that have not yet been made off of that market. And the cool thing about like science and all the stuff that we kind of shy away from, the cool thing about those is it doesn't matter what you look like, because exactly what you said, as long as 1 + 1 = 2, as long as the results show, it's less about your appearance and more about the data and the science. If you're building a video game or an educational program, no one necessarily knows who built it. You know what I mean? So it's less about that. And there are these fields, especially science, math, and, you know, that's where we actually need to be, because there's so much freedom in those fields outside of being, you know, an entrepreneur. But yeah, we should be going to those fields in droves. I love you have so much insight. And I don't even know if you realize, but I guess you've just been in it for so long. You dropped a couple of gems on me already. Just in wrapping up, this is a bigger subject that we'll end with, our history as it relates to public education and correctly teaching the history of Black and brown folks. How do you foresee the education system tackling this again? Because the books have to be rewritten. A lot of things have to get a lot more real. There are stories that have, that need to be talked about. And it empowers us all when we empower the people who are suffering the most. It makes us all better. So in saying that, how do you foresee the public education system tackling the truth about Black history and Hispanic, and, you know, because it all kind of blends into the same thing, that history? How do you foresee them tackling this?
I think changing the way we educate about history, the change has to be, there has to be three major things that change. Number one, we need to change, and I get a lot of flack about this, we need to stop focusing on the fact that it's Black history and just call it history. Okay. Because I taught when I was in Newark, even though I was the science teacher, I had to teach social studies too. Like I was talking about being understaffed, right? But we went over philosophers, we went over, certain types of inventions. It was never called Greek history. It was like, these philosophers are Greek, but this is history, right? So the focus wasn't on the fact that they're Greek. The focus is, this is what they said. We're still using some of these things today, right? And I think that focusing on the fact that it's Black history makes it seem individual when our impact on the world as Black and brown people has been global. This is world history. This is history, period.
Yes.
Right? And that's why when we call it Black history, that's why, okay, well, it's February. Okay, well, no, this is this is the impact that our people have had on the world. And the world wouldn't be what it is today without the impact of this culture or these cultures on the world. So it needs to be taught as that, in my opinion. It needs to be taught as that.
I love that.
Now, I do think it needs to be pointed out that these were Black people. The same way we know, that Socrates was Greek. His being Greek ain't the focus. The focus is what was his philosophy and all these other kind of things, right? So I think that it needs to be pointed out that these were Black people who did this, who brought this to the table. But I think the focus needs to be on how big of an impact they made, because this society, this world, the economy, whatever, wouldn't be what it is without the impact. And if we focus on the impact, you cannot deny that, right? So people could choose to avoid certain parts of the truth, right? But what people cannot do is say, well, this isn't impactful.
Right.
But once the light is on, you can't unsee it.
Right.
Right. So that's the first change I think that needs to take place. The second change that needs to take place, like you said, with rewriting the books, Black history, quote unquote, didn't just start with slavery. Like people, I was a kid, like, okay, Martin Luther King, okay, Rosa Parks, okay. But, we weren't taught about Hannibal. We weren't taught about, civilizations that were thousands of years
Africans
ago.
were sailing to this country before there was even a Christopher Columbus.
Centuries before anybody else. You get what I'm saying? Like, so I think that if we're gonna teach history, we need to teach history. If we can learn about Chinese dynasties that took place 5,000 years ago, I don't understand why we can't talk about African dynasties. You know what I mean? Like it needs to be a total revamp. I'm big on stuff like that. I'm a visual learner. I'm big on like, okay, this map is not accurate.
Right. Yeah.
This map is not accurate. Africa is a lot bigger than even the map makers give it credit for. And I understand as a scientist about proportions, and you don't want it to be the wrong shape on the globe, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
But you can sure figure out a way to make other things.
Yeah.
Figure out a way to get it right, because the more that we make it seem as if this is not really that worth, it's not really worth the time, the more the people just see nothing wrong with just skirting over it. And you can't have, quote unquote, the villain writing the story.
Right.
Right. So if all of our history is taught by the colonizers, of course they're gonna like downplay the atrocities that they've committed, and and frame it in a way that their perspective seems noble. You know what I mean? Like
the Gone with the Wind version of slavery, where people got decent living conditions, and people fell in love with their plantation owners.
You fell in love with the person that bought you. Sold your family off. Like,
be everybody a part of your community in front of you on a daily basis. But we fell in love.
Yeah. So I think that that's the second part. And the third, which I get a lot of kickback for, is the whole construct of the educational system is wrong. Like, we are teaching public school kids how to become factory workers.
Right.
But that's not what it is anymore.
Which actually is the design of public schools.
It is.
I mean,
but even when it started being like, okay, people aren't really working in factories, let's focus on going to college. Then you started having these college prep programs, right?
Let's push
but even that's not effective. That's not effective anymore, because like most people nowadays, they go to college, they graduate hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt with no job.
Especially people who identify as Black and brown, because your college degree is equivalent to a white man's high school diploma. And now you're in so much debt trying to catch up. And then even still, when you go to buy a house, if you live mostly around people that look like you, it's just so systematic. But yeah.
And I think that I think the problem is the construct of the system. Like I was telling my husband, his uncle is a carpenter, and he was like, these public schools don't even have wood shop anymore. They don't have auto shop. They don't have home ec, right? So everybody kind of was like, well, let's get away from the trades and let's push everybody to college. Mm-hmm. But now that's not effective, right?
Right.
You know, I talk to him all the time. Like I mentioned before, my son has autism, right? So a lot of people feel like, okay, well, he's not going to fit into the construct of a regular school yet. I don't have a problem with that, because creativity gets stifled out, right? So now if you go K to 12 and then go to college, you don't know what ideas you could have had creatively that you didn't have time for in your 8:30 to 3:30 day, right? We don't give the kids time to be creative. We don't give the kids time to be bored. We don't give the kids time to just sit and daydream. It's like every minute of the day, you have to be doing something physically productive. But all the innovation is coming through entrepreneurs. All the innovation is coming with people that have time to just think and let their minds wander.
Right.
But our school system is not set up for that, right? Our school system is still set up. Our school system is still set up for people to clock in the morning, you know, to sit at that desk in them rows or them columns, to put the widget on whatever this machine is, to eat lunch for this half hour and then clock out at the end of the day. Like, our school system is still set up for that, even though technology and innovation and everything has moved past that. So now we're setting them up to fail, which is why the U.S. is not the leader in technology anymore, which is why the U.S. is like behind, because all these other countries and societies are evolving their education system along with how things are moving, and we're not.
Yeah, so we actually import a lot of intelligence. We import a lot of specialized skills from other countries because we're not hitting the mark here.
We're not giving kids the time or the space. It's really about the space. We're not giving kids the space to listen. When a kid is, I can take my son, autism or not, when a 5-year-old is bored, they'll sit and imagine things. Kids come up with imaginary playthings. They'll use a remote as a phone. They'll, you know, all those things are naturally inquisitive in kids, right? But then the older they get, we teach them, that's not what that's for. Put that down. That's not what that's for. That's not what you use that for. You go and sit around and do, I mean, my parents, you want to sit around and do nothing? Pick up a rake, pick up a broom. Like, you can't have idle time. But where do you think people coming up with these ideas? They have time to sit, which is why, like you were saying, which is why people, you know, in Silicon Valley, people who are, you know, biomedical engineers, they give them that time. You work for Google, you got all the time in the world. You know why?
You can take a nap if you want.
You know why? Because when you wake up, we don't know what idea you're going to come up with. So we'll give you your space. You know what I mean? But school is not driven towards that.
And it's so sad.
I think the problem is the construct of school. Like, we have to change that. It shouldn't be you know, people, you know, turning into robots. I get that there has to be order. Listen, I'm not saying that a K to 8 school should be a free for all.
Right, but it's indoctrination.
It is. It is.
You know, it's how to stand in line. Like you said, how to stand in line, how to clock in, how to take your half-hour lunch, how to meet deadlines and this and that. And it's not about being expansive and creative and thinking outside the box and being individual, all the things that you're going to need outside of these, you know, outside of these walls. But
and think about the impact that this lockdown. Listen, I've been in contact with so many people that have come up with business ideas just because they couldn't leave their house.
Yep.
Me and my husband have started 2 businesses. You know, it's like, you can't leave the house. There's only so much quote unquote work you can do from home, right? Once my students are done with their work, I'm done with work for the day. I've graded everything, right? But once we have this time and the space to sit still and let our mind wander, people are coming up with ingenious things.
Absolutely.
That never would have entered their mind if they were on that 9 to 5. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. Exactly. And then after you clock out, then you got to come home, you got to cook dinner, you got to help your kids with their homework, you got to mow the grass. Like, not everything needs to be scheduled.
Agreed.
And I think that's a benefit of coming out of this.
One last question. Even though I said my last question was going to be my last question, but you're just so interesting.
Oh, thank you.
A student comes up to you after you guys reopen, right? And says, ask for your opinion on the George Floyd incident and the riots and what's been happening. What's the school's approach to handling what's been going on in the past couple of months?
The school's approach. All right, my district's approach is there are, kind of like round the clock counseling for people who just feel overwhelmed, or to people who don't know how to deal with their fear. And then my school's approach is a little more personal in regards to publicly acknowledging that this is a problem, and it has been a problem. I think it's really important for schools, teachers, whatever, adult the kid goes to. I think it's really important to point out that this was not a one-time thing.
Right.
That this has been happening for hundreds of years. And I think that the most important way to kind of get kids to relate is to make something personal. The population of students in my school is not mainly Black. Like I said, we have a high immigration population. So, maybe, if I'm being generous, maybe 5% of the students in my school are Black.
Okay.
And then there are some white kids, but most of the kids in my school, maybe 90% of the students in my school are, Latino. They're, from mainly South American too. But
and even more oppressed group specifically right now.
So it's easier to relate what they've gone through personally with what they're seeing.
Right.
And even though there are clear distinctions racially of the treatment of people of color are still classified depending on what color, you know what I mean? Is the same, but it's about that feeling. That feeling you felt when that person came out and assumed you were causing trouble when all you were doing was picking up your little brother. That feeling that you felt like, I'm not even doing anything.
Yeah.
That's the feeling we have. And even when, I've had white coworkers reach out to me. I'm only one of 2 Black Black people in the school, and I've had coworkers reach out to me over this lockdown and say, like, what is going on, and why, why is there? Some have said, why is there such this uproar, and why? And I said, you sit there and count 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Count. You complain when we got a fire drill.
Yeah.
And we have to inconvenience ourselves for that 8 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You physically watched somebody die.
Yeah.
For no reason other. So that's something you can't deny. You can't unsee that, right? So it's one thing to say, I can say, well, this coworker said this, and I felt like that was racist. It's easy to be like, oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, everything's a race issue. No, but you saw this. You saw this.
Yeah.
And there's nobody has a viable explanation.
Right.
And so it's about the schools letting the students know it doesn't matter what I look like. Wrong is wrong.
Right.
Period. And it doesn't matter if I'm white, if I'm Latino, if I'm Black, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Wrong is wrong. And when wrong is done, everybody who sees that it's wrong is responsible for doing whatever it takes to make it right.
Right. Especially at the grade level that you're teaching, because what do we always tell children? Don't lie, you're going to get punished if you do something wrong, and trying to just explain it away as like, oh, well, that was just one person who did something bad, or however, just to like breathe over it.
Yeah, or even criminalizing the victim. Like,
right.
I don't care if he just got out of prison. No one has the right to take someone's life.
Unarmed.
Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Shackled, unarmed. Like, no, this is not a,
Right.
I didn't see him. He rode his bike out and my car hit his bike and I didn't see it. This was an intentional thing. And it needs to be addressed as a bigger problem than just that specific case. It needs to be addressed as, look, this is what Black and brown people have been going through since they got here.
Right.
And for those, people who are like, oh, well, we've made so many strides. Like, oh, we made so many strides. If the protesters were peaceful. I've had so many, if they were peaceful, now they're looting and they're rioting. And I've said, Martin Luther King was peaceful and they killed him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So clearly it doesn't matter what tactics we use,
and
right?
Also, one of the things that I've said like a million times is you can't go to your oppressor and ask them how best to make them change. People don't change unless they're uncomfortable. And unfortunately, in this case, when you're talking about the specific giant that we're up against, it's all about dollars. It's all about dollars and power. So if you don't attack dollars and power, which is your retail location, Target, this and that, because like, I get it. People are frustrated with just kneeling. Y'all have been ignoring that for the longest time. So, and also it's crazy to me, the people who defend the people who are so up in arms about the rioting. It's like, you're not even a business owner. You're an employee. Why are you fighting for corporations? They're going to be A-okay. Why weren't those corporations sending out representatives to give bottles of water to the people who were protesting that? Why aren't you doing something to make a change? Businesses have insurance. Like, it blows my mind when we're talking about the subject matter that we're talking about. You're talking about a brick and mortar. Bro.
Yeah, it's what people choose to prioritize. You're prioritizing this physical building.
And it's like the tiniest percentage of occurrences when you look at the peaceful protests. But it's like somebody told me an example of like somebody getting their ankle stuck in between two rocks, right? And they're like, help me, my ankle's stuck. And the person is like, well, what about my ankle? What? It's my ankle.
I had a conversation because my brother was saying, so many of his coworkers and colleagues were saying like, well, what's wrong with saying all lives matter, right? And so my brother, listen, he's an engineer. He's not used to like talking to me. He's like, listen, I'm gonna ask my sister.
Yeah.
And I said, this is like this. This is like, if somebody says Black Lives Matter and then somebody responds says all lives matter, to me, that's like going to a breast cancer awareness walk with a sign that says prostate cancer kill.
Right.
Nobody goes to a breast cancer walk and says that no other cancer is important.
Right.
But this is not the time or the place to talk about prostate cancer, right? We're talking about breast cancer. And if you really believed all lives matter, then would we need Black Lives Matter?
Right.
Isn't Black in all?
Right.
So if
all lives cannot matter if Black lives don't.
Yeah. So if all lives matter, then you should be right next to me.
Right.
Because this life matters too.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that in regards to the school's approach is to be honest and say, well, this country hasn't functioned as if all lives matter, right? We had to make Black lives not matter in order to justify how we've been to Black people.
And legislatively, in fact.
Yeah, they can't be considered people. They can't be considered people. Otherwise, we'd be going against our own quote unquote morals and values.
Right.
So for us to be able to justify it, then they're not people.
Right.
But if we taught history correctly, which is what I was saying, it's not even just about regular history. Like as a science teacher, technologically, okay, black people ain't worth nothing. Put your cell phone down. Put that down. Put that down. Put that down. Put that down. Because even the people, and it's not even about, who owns this patent. It's not about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I can go all day. Thomas Edison didn't do that. That was his black assistant who came up with that. But because he was white, he could put his name, like
medical advancements, science advancements, all kinds of things. All kinds of things have been stolen, just straight up stolen. I mean, Henrietta Lacks, that's just one. And that was the one that we know about and they made a movie about. But how many years were we not told about her?
And how many others? Listen, for everyone that we know the story of, I'm sure there are
100.
Because at the end of the day, the same way white people were saying, oh, there's no police brutality. Now you saw this one. You have no idea these unnamed people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? The unnamed people who have gone through the same thing, whose family line has been destroyed.
Yep.
Like the fact that people are now saying, I never knew this happened. I didn't know Tulsa happened. I didn't know this happened. What do you mean Rosewood? They had no idea.
Yep.
Because nobody wanted to listen to us, quote unquote, complaining. But this is not complaining. We're telling you what really happened.
Right.
And like you said, I'm not going to ask how is the most convenient way for you.
Exactly. You're not going to change unless you're uncomfortable.
Give me what I deserve. Comfortable.
Yes.
Like I'm not letting up. You know what I mean? Like I'm not letting up. It's kind of like people talk about oysters making pearls. That sand is not going anywhere.
Yep.
The oyster has to change until that sand is no longer uncomfortable. We just got to stay being the sand. Okay.
Well,
you're going to be uncomfortable, but this comfort going to make you change because I'm not moving.
I mean, we got a lot of work ahead of us. We do. And I definitely am going to keep in the loop with the school year. Keep me in mind for any opportunities to volunteer for things or anything like that. I do actually have a few friends in that area.
Definitely.
But yeah, keep me in the loop. And you have to promise now, since I actually have it on recording, you got to promise to be back to the show. Since I'm recording, so you can't, I got the receipts.
Definitely.
All right, awesome. Heather, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. This has been an amazing interview. I'm wishing you luck in the school year. Be safe for you, your family, all your pupils, your kids, and we will definitely check on you guys and see how things are going.
She was dope, right? I told you guys. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening this week. I appreciate the love, guys. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, and also make sure you're telling people about the show. Make sure you're letting people know the show's lit. It's okay. You can say it. Listen, it is what it is. I love you guys. Be well. God bless. Thank you for listening to Spicy Pecan Podcast. This is a Wonderful Me Media production.